Welcome to the PharmaSource podcast. On today's podcast, I'm joined by David Caron, who is Senior Vice-President of CMC at Immunome, working on products such as varegacestat. David has extensive experience in working with external manufacturing partners, and he's spoken before with PharmaSource and at CDMO Live. David, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So David, I think you've got extensive experience working across many different biotechs in the CMC function. So I think it'd be really interesting, as a brief introduction, to walk through some of those experiences and some of the milestones along the way, please.
Okay. A long time ago, I studied at the University of Lyon in France. I've got a pharm degree, so I'm a pharmacist by education. And since then, I'm working in the pharmaceutical industry, leading evolving roles from formulator on the bench, really doing the daily basis, basic work, preparing formulation, testing them and reporting, up to today as a senior VP of CMC at Immunome in the US. From my past experience also, I think the most important thing is to take into consideration that I was involved with a lot of dosage forms for numerous countries. And so it means also for numerous regulatory agencies from EU, US, and I think both the different dosage form and the regulatory requirements have given me quite a lot of, experience to look at a product and to understand what could be done. And I would say, as usual, the easiest way, because doing things very complicated becomes a huge challenge. But when it required to be, tech transferred or scaled up.
Looking at your experience, David, apart maybe from time in companies like Teva early on, you've been working in a lot of early stage biotech scale-ups. I wondered if we could just talk about that a bit, about some of those unique challenges, which are fairly unique to biotechs, developing and manufacturing drugs, which has different challenges to those that big pharma might face. So I wonder maybe if we could just walk through some of those, about the main priorities from a biotech's point of view, such as securing investment, and then how you move fast after that funding rounds. What are those unique business challenges to doing what you do within a biotech?
Okay, so I think the main business challenge would be to do right the first time. And to do the right the first time, we need to look at, the overall risk, and the risk also related to each activities. Meaning, for a biotech, you cannot do multiple things in parallel. So if you invest the funds you got, you need to decide whether you put that in one bucket or in multiple buckets. Obviously, you would like to put that in multiple buckets and do things in parallel. But you have to weigh those things for every single activities, and not to say we cannot because we don't have the funds, or we're going to do that for everything and you're going to spend a lot of money for no real reason. So, for example, I will take the idea of multiple prototype. So if you're developing a product and you have only one prototype and you wait 6 months or 12 months to see, even if you look at, accelerated stability condition, but you still need to wait a certain duration, which can be, between 3 to 6 months to see something happening if it's really happened. If you do that on one prototype and you wait 6 months to see the result, which is in fact 7 months until you get the results of the 6 months, you lost 7 months of your life. I mean, how do you recover that? And you were planning to go into a clinical study phase 1, 2 or 3 months later, after you get your 6 months accelerated stability, and you cannot do that. So you are back by 1 year now. If you were having 2 prototypes in the stability chamber, maybe the second one would show better results because you've done something different. And that is the type of things that, I mean, are essential, I think, for biotech. It is critical as well for a large company, but really for biotech, you cannot survive if you're losing 7 months of your life.
Would you say that's quite typical then, David, in your experience, to have multiple prototypes running side by side?
Yes, definitely. And not only for stability purposes, but also for, pharmacokinetics, because you're doing some in vitro dissolution testing until you have a model or a pharmacokinetic in vitro in vivo correlation. You don't really know what's going to happen. So if you have a fast release prototype and a maybe slightly slower release prototype, you can think about maybe going into an in vitro in vivo correlation on those two prototypes and learn a lot, because with one shot you will get one set of results, and then if it's not exactly what you're looking for from a pharmacokinetic point of view, it would be good to have two set of results so you can adjust that again.
And would you tend to want to put those with different partners, or usually are you choosing the same development outsourcing partner for those prototypes?
So that's a very good question. I think that for biotech and maybe for more specifically what we're talking currently now for pharmacokinetic studies, normally you're going with one CDMO, a very good one, which is very specialized in that. Very important to have a good contract to make sure that you're going to get not only results but very good reports, because at the end of the day that's what we're going to submit, and making sure also that you will always get access to the raw data. Potentially it can be requested during a pre-approval inspection, or you can be suddenly finding that the results were not exactly correct, so you want to go back to the source data. Very important. For other typical drug developing and manufacturing side, I think that the biotech will more looking for a long-term contract. Even though we're going to go from development maybe up to clinical and maybe up to commercial, biotech would preferably stay with the same CDMO, assuming that the selection process was correct, and you're happy along the day, that you're working together, that you're really getting what you want.
So even then, when you're at a very early stage of development, you're still looking at who could 5-10 years down the line potentially who could be doing full manufacturing. Did that play a role in your selection at that early stage?
That will be my approach. And we never know at the end of the day if it's correct, but in the process of the selection for making a clinical batch, I would prefer to have a CDMO that can also take it, to the next step, to the scale up, to the commercial. Maybe not fully packed. Maybe they don't have blisters capabilities or bottles capabilities. But I think, along the days and the years that you're working together, you're learning a lot. It's not only what is written, even though we are in the pharmaceutical industry and what is written is what existing and what is not written doesn't exist. But there is still things that you get to understand better, to practice. And the people who are working together with you are learning together with you. And this knowledge becomes very critical for scale up, critical for the limitation of a formula, of a process, that, some tiny things that needs to be well understood and practical.
Does that naturally then steer you towards larger all-in-one type of CDMOs if you're thinking about all the things that they could be doing further and further down the line?
I don't think that you really want to look for the large CDMOs. I mean, the large CDMOs can be very slow and very expensive. And as a biotech, you will compete with other large company working at those CDMOs. So what is the weight you have when you want something very urgent? The CDMOs are big. They have a lot of activities ongoing and they are not so much flexible. Even the quotation process can be very lengthy. Till you ask for a quote, you get a quote, it's been reviewed internally, you get it signed off, and you get a slot. That can take 2 or 3 months easily. For biotech, it can be very critical if you want, to do something very quickly. With a small biotech who likes working with you, who knows that how much is important you are for him, for this CDMO, because you become someone critical for the CDMO. You're spending a lot of money and time together. Maybe they don't have, another 10 other contracts or programs, or they are small programs and you are a heavy one. So you're becoming much more important for the CDMO. So they want to do more for you. That's what I think is happening on the biotech side.
What advice, David, do you have around how to manage costs and timelines? Because obviously that's so critical. Is it generally done on a quarter by quarter basis? Are you very aware of where you're at in terms of the cash that you're working through and what you've got to achieve? It'd be great to understand a bit more about what it's like to work in that environment and any advice you have about how to navigate it.
So budget should be really very detailed, to my opinion, and should be based not on only estimation, but on real quote. Either you have, some quotes from your past experience and you know how much it can cost, or you have already started to send RFP and you have, multiple scope of work with proposal. So I think the quote should be very detailed as well and should not be just, a number. When you're sending an RFP, I think it's essential to detail what needs to be done. And I will take an example. When you're looking for stability program, someone can tell you it costs whatever, $100,000, $150,000, $50,000. What does it include? How many prototype? What's the length of the stability? What are the storage conditions? What are the container closure system? 1, 2, 3. I mean, all those are multiple costs. So doing a stability program for one dosage form in one container closure is obviously not the same as doing for 2 prototypes in multiple container closure system at different storage condition, and whether you're doing that in parallel or in series, completely different. So you need definitely to try to understand how you're planning to do stability. And it becomes, again, part of what we were saying before, how much you have planned your development. So are you going upfront with 2 or 3 prototype and you will have 2 or 3 prototype ready on the same day and they will go into stability around the same timing. So you can have a cost for a stability program, which will be, a time interval for 3 prototypes at the same date. So it's less expensive than running 3 stability program with time intervals at different dates, because the CDMO will run the 3 prototypes with 1 HPLC, and it's much less expensive than running 3 HPLC at 3 or different weeks along the month. So that helped very much to cost, to budget properly and to be much more accurate. I think we need also to, in biotech, I very often look at the payment terms, not just accepting, 20%, 30% down payment. That's a lot of money for biotech.
Yeah.
And I think it's something that CDMOs are ready to discuss if you raise the question. For example, in the past, again, related to stability. I was against paying, 10 or 20% on set down of a stability program, which will go for 2 or 3 years, is not 20% of the overall cost. It should be $5,000, not, 30 or 40 or $50,000. It's a huge difference.
Do you also look at trying to strike the right balance between in-house resource and the types of added value services which you could get within the CDMO as well? So if you've got a limited budget and you're thinking, well, do I need to bring in extra quality people, for example, or maybe the CDMO has people in those sorts of roles that can be part of it. Is that part of the selection process as well? So you're trying to manage what you can get within the CDMO versus what you'd have to spend on in-house?
It all depends. There are a lot of biotech who are completely virtual. So you don't have any option to do anything in-house. However, when you're working with a CDMO, you can also define that the CDMO is very good at something, but you already know that, for example, analytical method development, it's not something for, I don't know, for particle size distribution, for example. They're not the best. And when they quote you, you've seen that they were not having a lot of experience. So you can say, you know what, particle size distribution, it's out of the scope. And I will go to someone else who really had the experience to deal with that and can do, method development and a pre-validation. And then you can decide to take the method that has been already pre-validated back to your CDMO, or you can decide at the end of the day that you will continue to do the release of the particle size distribution test outside, and you will ask your CDMO to qualify the other CDMO for GMP release purposes.
Does that work? Have you seen that working?
I'm doing that right now.
Right.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I mean, the example is exactly what's happening. We are working with a large drug substance manufacturer, but they don't have a lot of experience with particle size distribution. They were starting to say, yeah, you have needles and it doesn't work so well, etc. That's not exactly correct. And we found someone else who's going to do that. And we have the two options. We haven't yet decided. We're going to complete the method development and pre-validation. And then we will decide whether we take the method back to the CDMO who is synthesizing the drug substance, or we will continue to use this CDMO, who is a GMP CDMO, who can, in the future, validate the particle size distribution, get a sample from this CDMO who is manufacturing the drug substance, and giving a results that will be, copy-paste to the COV of the drug substance.
I suppose sitting where you do, David, in Israel, on one side you've got Europe and generally a higher cost base when it comes to manufacturing, and on the other you've got the Indian subcontinent, lots and lots of manufacturing there at a far lower cost. How does outsourcing around different geographies play a role in your decision-making process? Are there opportunities to put manufacturing in lower cost countries? How have you found it?
The selection of CDMO is not just a cost. The selection of CDMOs is a matrix of quality attributes that you decide upon each of the project for each biotech company. And definitely in India, and I would say also in China, there is a lot of CDMOs who can do very good work at a much better price. Now, the question is always an integration of all what you want to achieve. You want to achieve quality, you want to achieve, the speed of development. Are you willing to do only a portion of the development and you're already having in mind that you prefer to do very quickly at a low cost and then tech transfer the development to a larger CDMO located somewhere else? Because you have in mind that you don't want to, go commercial from India. That can be a decision. That's a
Mm.
strategic decision that you can have. From my past experience, working with the Indian CDMO has not been a real challenge more than, Europe or US. It's a culture difference,
Hmm.
time zone difference, and all that needs to be managed. So with some experience, there is a good way to manage those challenges. And I think that having been here in Israel, we are working Sunday to Thursday,
Mm.
while the world is working, Monday to Friday. That's already one challenge. Time zone difference and culture is another challenge. But when you're building the right relationship and you are confident and you are really managing what's happening, I think you can make it.
With the highly potent drugs that you're working on currently, what specific challenges are you facing around that? Be interested to know what particular pressures there are around dealing with HP APIs and also what the outsourcing landscape looks like for these types of products. Have you found it to be more limited that when you look at other categories?
Definitely. I mean, not all the CDMOs have the highly potent drug
Hmm.
capabilities. Some of them have for a certain class of high potent drug, and they don't have for higher. The other thing that I found in the past is, if you need on top of the highly potent drug, you know that you need to use, for example, organic solvent,
Okay.
then you have another issue. Not all highly potent drug CDMO have X-proof rooms. You
Hmm.
cannot use ethanol, for example, because they don't have the safety procedure for that. This is completely different to highly potent. So definitely this area is much more limited, and it's taking more efforts to select a CDMO that can
Hmm.
handle this highly potent drug.
So more.
Finally, I would say also highly potent sometimes or very often would say small batches.
Mhm.
So again, if we think about a large CDMO, does a large CDMO wants to deal with, 400-gram drug substance batch? Maybe not. Thinking about that maybe you will need to commercialize, 10 batch per year. Is it
Mm.
worth for the CDMO, a large CDMO, to get into that? Because, from a formulation, from a development perspective, it's still the same amount of work. I mean, you need to do everything, whether it's 400-gram or 400 kilo.
Thank you. Finally, David, I wonder if there's any advice that you could share for others who want to become a strategic business partner to the CEO and the leadership of the company. How is it best to align with the overall leadership direction of the company and really show how CMC can support and drive the development of the strategy overall?
Now, that's a very good and painful question.
Mm.
I mean, CMC has been always, to my opinion, found as, people who come to the CEO to ask for money and come back with issues.
Yeah.
So definitely you need to learn how to appeal to the CEO, why the CMC is so critical. And it's by presenting, strategic plan with risk mitigation and to capture the confidence of the CEO that you really understand what you're doing and you know how to reduce cost, you know
Mm.
how to reduce the timelines, to accelerate a program by either doing things in parallel, which is risky maybe, but also can save a lot of time and money. And I think that this jungling between cost, experience, risk mitigation, uh, is something that will talk to the CEO in a way that he can understand what you're talking, because you're going to start speaking the same language and not just come with your issues and your money that you need. And if you don't agree, we're going to delay. No, present what makes your life easier for also the CEO to understand how he can really support you and help you to achieve the goals, which are mutual. Because if you don't develop the product and you don't have a clinical batch, you will have no clinical data. And thank you, nothing's going to happen.
No company. Yeah.
Exactly. And another example, why to do a larger batch? Because, you're going to enter into the clinical study and suddenly you need more material and you don't have that in stock. So you're at the risk of shortage in clinical. It's killing. You cannot, you cannot support that. So if you have a 20% spare and it's not going to be used, too bad for the 20%, but wasting a clinical study which can length 6 months, a year, it's a disaster. And clinical shortage are not welcome on the market, on the business market.
In your experience then, any advice you could share, I guess, around how to reinforce those things that you were talking about? So the fact that you are the experts, you're managing the risk and the cost and the timelines. But is there a particular structure you'd like to use or a communication cadence? Because the timeline is so critical to the overall business. How do you make sure that everyone's aligned to that and kept in the loop?
So it's really about preparing very good deck presentation, which are built on real timelines. And when I'm talking about real timelines, I'm really talking about using program tooling management, and not just an Excel spreadsheet where you plug in some bars, but you're using, MS Project, Smartsheet, whatever, and you present a real timeline where you can, put more or less details depending on the audience you are talking to, but also showing the relationships between the different activities and showing the critical path. So all that is speaking, you're speaking the same language that a CEO, a commercial person will understand. And that's, I think, buying much more confidence and relationship with the people who need to fund what you want to do.
On a personal level, David, do you find it rewarding?
Okay, so there is two ways to think about that. The first, to my opinion, CMC, as much as it can be transparent to the company, means everything is in place. Meaning, if you don't have a shortage in clinical supply, because maybe you are responsible for that, because you didn't, took action, you didn't plan properly to manufacture in time and to take all the duration of the activities in consideration for making sure that you can submit as per you were requested. So if you're transparent, if during the board of the board meeting you just present something and there is no question, that's excellent, meaning you're doing a good job. But it's also frustrating because sometimes it looks like it's obvious, which at the end of the day, after more than 30 years, I decided that not a big deal. My ego is not so high. If I don't need to present anything because everything is on time and is okay, I'm happy. That would be the answer.
Thank you, David. Thank you so much for your time today. Absolute pleasure speaking to you.
You're welcome. Nice to have you.
Experience the future of contract manufacturing at CDMO Live 2025. Join us at the World Trade Centre Rotterdam on May the 7th and 8th, 2025 for an exclusive event that brings together the sharpest minds in biopharma outsourcing. For 2 days filled with market insights, best practices, and partnering. Early bird tickets are now available, so head to cdmolive.com to download the agenda and to book your ticket.